All right, in this problem, I'm going to review a compound interest problem. So before I jump into it, I want to quickly review what is compound interest. So the equation for compound interest is y equals p 1 plus r divided by n to the nt in the exponent. This is typically a formula that's given to you, especially on the ACT and stuff like that. So the pieces that are here is P represents your principal amount. So that's typically your principal amount or your initial, whatever you're starting with. R is going to be pretty common with most other things. That is your rate. So that is usually a percentage changed to a decimal form. So that is decimal. Don't leave it as just a straight percentage. T is pretty obvious as well. That is going to be the time. So, typically it's years. How many years is it happening? And then N is the interesting part. N is the compounds. So that one is a little bit interesting, and that's basically the only hard part of these problems. It's the compounds. So when you're looking at N, what you're looking for is you're asking yourself, how many times are you compounding in a year? So a lot of this has to do with paying attention to the vocab in the problem. The common vocab is you'll see compounded annually or yearly. You'll see semi-annually. You will see quarterly, monthly, and then daily. Those are the common language, so year or annually there. That is the common language of what you'll see in the problem. And these words are basically telling you what N is. So what you're looking for is you're looking for, well, if each of these happen, how many times does that happen a year? So if something happens annually, so prom for students happens one time a year, it's an annual thing. That tells you that N is 1. If something is semi-annually, and again, this kind of goes back to your vocab strengths or weaknesses, semi being 2, that's twice a year. So if something's semi-annually, that happens twice a year. Quarterly, you could think of sports. That helps you. How many quarters are in a game? Well, there's 4. Quarterly happens 4 times. And then monthly, well, how many months are in a year? Well, there's 12. And then finally, daily, that is 365 times a year. So N just represents how often are you compounding this interest? How many times are you applying interest throughout a year? Once, twice, 4 times, 12 times, 365 times. So with these problems, what we're going to do is we look at this, and how I know I'm using this is the compounds monthly tips me off there. And I'm just going to replace PR, N, and T with what pieces I know. So I'm going to start with Y equals. So I need to know what the principal amount is. What is my initial amount? Well, I'm starting by investing $3,500 into an account that compounds monthly at 2.29%. How much will be in the account after 6 years? So we're starting with 3,500. So I'm going to start with 3,500. And then I'm going to go into, well, what's the R, the rate? Well, it says 2.29%. So if it's 2.29%, if I want the decimal form of that, we're going to move our decimal point 2 places to the left. So 1, 2, so that would make it 0.0229. And then T, time, how long are we doing this? Well, it says after 6 years, so I could plug in for T is 6. Then I need to figure out how many compounds. I got to figure out N. Well, since it's compounding monthly, we know, well, how many months are in a year? 12. So I'm going to plug in 12 for my N. Notice how there's also an N up in the exponent. So what I have to do is I could plug this into a calculator, plug and chug it all out. Things that I would do to try and help you just a little bit is I would actually figure out what is this exponent. Instead of typing in 6 times 12 in a calculator, when you're typing all this in, let's figure out what that is. So when you simplify it just a little bit, another thing you could do is you could also divide these two and get a fraction. But the more you start doing that, then you're going to start losing decimal places by rounding, and it's not completely accurate. So I usually leave the inside alone. But what I do like to do is figure out what is that exponent. So 6 times 12 is 72. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug all of that into my calculator. And I'm going to do it with a whole lot of parentheses where I see parentheses here. So I'm going to start with 3,500 parentheses 1 plus, and then I need 0.0229. Then I need my division sign, 12. So I'm kind of going left to right. Then I need a parentheses, and then I need an exponent of 72. So this is your exponent key. Exponent 72. I'm going to hit an arrow over just to make sure everything's out, so I can look at what I have in my calculator and make sure it's the same as what I have written on my paper. Hit enter, and we get our answer of, and this is money, $4,014. I'm going to round that up to, instead of 97 cents, we're going to say 98 cents. And that is compound interest.